Hi guys, so in this video, feel free to like and subscribe if you like the content, and if you are interested in private coaching, go to www.coachkat.org. I am going out to dinner, that's why I'm all dressed up for my birthday, but I just wanted to go over, in this one, I want to talk about boundaries. So boundaries are essential to healthy relationships. It doesn't matter if you're dating, if it's a narcissist or a cluster B, or just in general, it's so important that you have boundaries. And why are we afraid to set boundaries? A lot of times it's because we have a fear of abandonment. We think that if we say, hey, this is what I need to feel safe in this relationship, this is my boundary, please respect it, we are afraid if we do that somebody is going to leave or abandon us or not want to be with us. And what my message to you is, if that happens, that's great, because that means that they weren't the right person for you. If the person, if you set a boundary, which is what you need to feel safe, if you set a limit, which is what you need to feel okay in a relationship, and the person can't honor that in the early stages, then how are they going to honor you later on? How are they going to honor their boundaries or your boundaries later on, right? So basically, our fear of abandonment is something that can often keep us from setting boundaries, because we're afraid somebody's going to leave. And what I would encourage you to consider is, if you set a boundary and they leave or they abandon you, they're not the right person for you. And what are boundaries? Boundaries are what you need to feel safe. They are your personal limits. And, of course, when you set a boundary in the moment, somebody, especially if you're setting a physical boundary, like around sex or something like that, in the moment, somebody can be egoically wounded. They can get their ego can be a little bit wounded, and it can feel rejecting, right? And I get that. Like, I totally get that. I think we've all been there, where it's like somebody was like, no, that doesn't work for me. And like in the moment, it might feel sort of hurt our ego. But if we take time to process and recognize, like, oh, that person just telling me what they need, what their limits are, what makes them feel safe. And maybe in that moment, it didn't feel very good, but I've been able to process it, and I realize that they totally have the right to state what makes them feel safe, and to stick with that. So it's important that I respect that. So I'm going to talk just about a little bit about like how to do this boundary setting thing. First, you got to know what they are. You've got to be very clear on what your boundaries are, what your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual limits are. Consider what you will tolerate and accept, and what makes you feel or what makes you feel uncomfortable, or what makes you feel safe. Get really clear on what makes you feel safe. And then tune into your feelings. If you're the things to look for, red flags or cues. What are red flags and cues? It doesn't mean the person's bad. It doesn't mean that. A red flag or a cue is telling you there's something that I need to pay attention to here, because I'm feeling discomfort or I'm feeling resentful. And notice that, right? And so, resentment usually comes from feeling taken advantage of, not appreciated, not respected, not listened to. When someone acts in a certain way that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's a cue to us that they might be violating or crossing a boundary. And they might be doing it without even knowing it, because maybe you didn't set it, right? So you have to be able to communicate your boundaries. And if you're codependent, or you're an empath and a people pleaser, it can be really hard to do this, because you might feel like you're not being nice, or it may be very uncomfortable for you to put somebody else's needs, wants, and desires at par with yours, or to even put yours higher, because you're the one who needs to be able to communicate this to another person. So it's really, really important that that you respect yourself, that you respect your boundaries. And sometimes you're going to need to be very direct. Other times you can be more subtle. It totally depends upon the person you're dealing with. But sometimes you might have to be very, very direct and very clear with your boundaries. And then other times you might be more subtle. And of course, if you're new at boundary setting, you might be very awkward at this and crappy at it. I know I am. I'm terrible at it. I'm still learning. So my boundaries come across like kind of ridiculous. It's like, oh, here's the affidavit that I got signed and notarized by an attorney, and I had 5 different people consult on this. Like, that's how ridiculous. For me, it's really hard to set boundaries. So I'm learning this, and when I start setting them, like, it comes across in a pretty awkward fashion, maybe even, sometimes offensive, but that's okay. You're doing the best you can do. You just keep doing it, and with practice, it's going to get better and better. And give self permission. You know, if you're codependent, if you're a people pleaser, you might have fear and guilt and self doubt and all these feelings associated with setting boundaries, because you might have grown up in a family where either the boundaries were enmeshed, they were too rigid, or your boundaries were violated, maybe in an egregious way. And so boundaries for you are a foreign language. Give yourself permission. It's okay if you feel fear, guilt, self doubt. Do it anyway. Fear is not, or courage is not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and doing the thing anyway. You know, sometimes when I'm about to climb some big route, I look up and I am freaking terrified. And you know what? Sometimes I'm able to overcome that fear and I just do it anyway, even though I'm scared. I take that next move anyway, even though I'm scared. And I most of the time I'm able to, you know, achieve my goal. And then practice self-awareness. Boundaries are all about honoring your feelings and honing in on them and honoring what's going on inside of you, and listen to your body and trust your intuition and listen to your intuition. And then consider your past and present. You may have all sorts of baggage in your mind around boundary setting. Like I said, I grew up in a family where as a child, my boundaries were egregiously violated in like a multitude of different ways. So for me, boundary setting is very difficult. And then make self-care a priority. Boundary setting is the highest act of self-love and self-care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.